What's the good word, y'all? DKB here. So this whole Duane Brown situation is throwing another wrench in what was already, one of the final pieces that maybe Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh couldn't piece together to this puzzle that's been built over the course of this offseason where we knew we wanted a veteran swing tackle presence for quite some time, and Duane Brown was backup plan A. He hasn't practiced in 2 days. We have this mysterious shoulder injury, which has come out of nowhere. And, maybe something happened during that final preseason game that we're unaware of. But nonetheless, it's impacting them. We don't really have a whole bunch of details surrounding it in regards to what the timeline looks like. I think that's hush hush right now based on how previous news has been handled with Zach Wilson and Mekhi Becton. So we'll see how that goes. But as for now, we'll probably only really be able to rely on the injury report to kind of gauge any kind of progress there. So now we're on to the backup plan or backup plan B, where not only heading into this week 1 game, do we potentially not have again our starting duo that we expected after already making arrangements, but we also have to decide whatever we do now, assuming Duane Brown doesn't have some long withstanding injury, can also impact chemistry among a bunch of other things moving forward. So George Fant, Connor McDermott, Max Mitchell are essentially our 53-man roster starting options, as well as the main backup. The most sensible thing in terms of us being able to put our best foot forward would be to allow George Fant to go to the left side. And at least in terms of how snaps have worked out and kind of the understanding of how we expect these players to work, is that Connor McDermott will be the main backup to George Fant. Max Mitchell should slide in as the starting right tackle. And, even though he's ahead of his development according to the staff, there's still things on tape, and it's not like they're hiding it either, that obviously, show that he still has a considerable amount of growth to take. The biggest knock again for him was strength, and I think that's what we've seen. The play where Zach Wilson got flushed from the pocket and got hurt, it was Max Mitchell collapsing. With that said, though, there was still a lot of good that came out of the preseason for Max Mitchell. Over 81 preseason snaps, he didn't allow a single sack to occur. So there were still a lot of positives. You can definitely tell that he's acclimating, and this probably goes into the acceleration a lot quicker. But again, he's going to probably be more of a tackle that can handle finesse rushers rather than necessarily being able to handle some of these power guys that are going to come up. So that was option A, right? George Fant goes to the left side. Max Mitchell slides in at right tackle. Connor McDermott becomes the backup swing. The issue with that is going to be if Duane Brown doesn't have a long-term injury and it's a short-term, even if he comes back that following week for the Browns game, or if it's another game or two and he comes back when Zach Wilson is coming back, then what happens? George Fant gets comfortable at left tackle. Maybe he wants to ride that out and he's having a lot of early season success. Duane Brown's never really switched over to the right side. We're asking George Fant to switch back over, and then we're kind of relying on Connor McDermott and Max Mitchell again. So it sounds easy enough, but how willing, George Fant's been the ultimate team guy so far, but how much more are we willing to ask of him in terms of what his goals are versus how he can best help the team? What does that mean for these contract negotiations? I'm sure with the success that he'll see on the left side, as well as continuing to improve on the right side, which again is a whole nother issue, he'll have to adjust midseason again to try to work on his technique and all of these things, depending on when, again, Duane Brown can come back. So it's kind of a crap storm for us right now. Realistically, a lot of us should be relatively worried, although I do think we still have a very solid chance of coming out with a victory this week. With that said, though, I think there's probably an emergency move that's going to be coming on the horizon. And ideally, if Duane Brown does have a long-term injury, that means George Fant will go back to left tackle. And the options become a lot more better for us because at least we're searching for a tackle that only needs to really man the right side. Maybe he can come in as an emergency, but the coaching staff has said repeatedly they feel comfortable with the depth and some of the progress that all of these guys are making. Connor McDermott Chuma Ndoga when he was on the roster, although he's no longer with us. Max Mitchell. We still got Grant Hermans that's out there. So, on the practice squad anyways, Chris Glazer. So we have some guys in the wings. It's really going to be a matter of, do they let them kind of work it out trial by fire and come up with a plan to give some extra support? Maybe that's CJ Uzomah blocking a little bit more, or Tyler Conklin off to the right side, something to that effect. But it takes the pressure off a little bit more, having to only focus on the right side rather than, find a decent, blindside protector for us. So it'll be an interesting situation. I actually end up shooting out a list a little bit later, some of these potential candidates that we can have as a backup for another veteran presence. But again, that ends up taking another position. So we'll see how all that impacts us as well. I mean, maybe we end up officially letting Connor McDermott go, who still, in my opinion, is not a very serviceable option. I would argue strongly that even though Max Mitchell is probably more of a right tackle, I'd rather rely on him for both roles rather than Connor McDermott. He's been beaten to death. I'd rather bring back Caleb Benenoch. I'd rather give Chris Glazer a chance. Even Hermans, at least he kind of brings some of that Trevor Penning-like ferocity with what we've seen with all the fights and stuff in the offseason. But let me know what your guys' thoughts are. How much of an emergency situation do you feel like we're in when it comes to the tackle position on our offensive line? And would you trust some of these young guys, or would you go ahead and spend some of this money that C.J. Mosley's contract restructure opened up for us to bring in another veteran? I'll catch you guys again. Peace.